There's a lot of hot seats in the NFL right now for these coaches. Find out whose is the hottest and their dynasty impacts. Let's go.
Let's go.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Dynasty After Dark. We're your hosts, Calvin Timms and Dale Terry. And today we got a fun one. We're going to just kind of go all in. But before we get into that, I want to thank everybody. We've seen a pretty big explosion in subscribers the last couple of weeks, and we really appreciate that. You know, we had the big videos of the re-ranking of this last year's rookie class. We're talking about the 2024 prospects, and there's going to be a lot more of that content coming out in the coming months after the NFL season. We're kind of in the middle of it. We're trying to get a couple of championships ourselves. You know, we're trying to help you guys as much as we can as well. But, you know, that's the one thing about Dynasty that we both love is that it's year round, essentially. There is no off season in Dynasty, and we're going to fill the entire off season with content for you guys. So all the new subscribers out there, thank you guys so much. If you've been here for a while, you know the routine. We're going to be cranking. I think this is like episode 160 already that we've done this year. So, you know, since since the Super Bowl of last year. So we've been putting them out, you know, pretty much every other day. We're kind of getting down to one a week now, but it's going to be ramping up here again in a couple of weeks. So it's going to be a good time, but thank you guys for joining us. And hopefully you like today's episode where we're going to be railing on some of these coaches in the NFL because the NFL has a massive coaching problem. I've been saying this for a while now. Offensive line and coaching, that's the number one and number two problems in the NFL, it seems like. But before we get to that, you can find us on Twitter at TDC_Calvin for myself, at Dynasty_Dale for my co-host here. You can find the podcast at FF After Dark. And also, like Twitter, we're on YouTube, Spotify, Rumble, Google, Apple, anywhere that podcasts are really found. You can hit us up over there as well if you have any questions or any roster, you know, trade questions, whatever it may be. But yeah, we're always available to help you guys out. Sorry, I've got a little bit of a cold today too, so I'm a little stuffed up trying to fight it off. So hang in there with us. But you know, it's that time of year. How you doing today, Dale?
Hey, I'm doing great. I'm just really excited about today's episode. Like we can finally air some grievances a little bit about these head coaches. And I mean, I do agree with you that, you know, it's the one and it's a high ranking problem is the NFL coaching, offensive line, and then I would say most people would agree with the NFL officiating has been really atrocious all year. It's just not good. Just
Yeah.
it just hasn't been good.
It's still amazing to me that they don't have full-time refs out there.
Yes, it's wild. It's
Like,
wild.
you know, it's funny. I actually, I'm an engineer, but I actually, you know, one of the older guys that just retired a couple years ago, he was a ref for the NFL part-time when he was a little bit younger. He met Bill Belichick, and you know, he confirmed that he's just as salty on as he seems in all his press conferences on the sidelines and
Right.
everything. But you know, he was an engineer full-time, part-time referee. So it's wild that the NFL is like that. But you know, you're eventually the product's going to take a hit, and they're gonna get the message.
Yep.
But until then. All right, so we're going to go with a countdown from 5 to 1 in terms of our, you know, whose seat is starting to heat up a little bit and then whose seat is just on fire. You're the dog meme. This is fine. And then you need to start looking
Yes.
out. But before we get to that, we had a couple of honorable mentions. Who was your honorable mention you wanted to talk about?
Mine was Brian Daboll with the New York Giants. You know, I feel his seat is starting to get a little bit warmer with what has really transpired this year. You know, a lot of it's not really his fault. You know, I think he really coached up those guys last year and he got a
Mm-hmm.
lot out of them. But it also helped that they had a really soft schedule compared to this year. It's a little bit tougher.
Mm-hmm.
And plus, Daniel Jones, you know, wasn't playing well before his ACL injury last week. So, yeah, it hasn't been good and hasn't really had any fantasy relevant players to really talk about. And, you know, that's not really on him. I would say it's more on the ownership, you
Yeah.
know, and the GM for not giving him good players to work with. But, you know, I think his seats might be getting a little bit warmer because sometimes people in in New York City get somewhat impatient about
Oh
their
yeah.
teams not playing well.
Oh yeah,
So
I will say I think for Dayball specifically that last year probably bought him a lot of credit for a
yes,
couple
I
more
agree.
years. I
Yep.
think if anybody's got to watch out over there, it's going to be the GM. You look at what all they did. Like supposedly Dayball did not want to extend Daniel Jones, and instead you gave him a 4-year, $160 million contract.
Right.
It looks like they're going to be in the running for Caleb Williams, Drake May, Michael Penix, one of those top guys in this upcoming class. So we'll see if they ultimately pull the trigger or if they go for someone like you know, uh, Marvin Harrison Jr. or the tight end from Brock
Brock
Bowers.
Bowers. Yep.
Sorry. But Brock Bowers, maybe they go for a weapon instead and they kind of believe in Daniel Jones. But Daniel Jones tearing his ACL so late in the year, it's going to be bad for this start of next year. He's not going to be available. Look at Kyler, for example. You probably won't have Daniel Jones until at least week 5, 6, 7, somewhere in that range. So it'll be interesting to see what they do in this offseason, but no, I like that as an honorable mention. My honorable mention was going to be Kevin Stefanski with the Cleveland Browns. And the reason why is this offense, the biggest thing for me when I focus on these guys is if you are a former offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator and your specific skill set is bad on your new team where you're the head coach, that's a major red flag for me because it means you're not really doing your job. And it's the whole, what do you even say you do around here?
Right.
if you're not Kevin Stefanski with a top 10 offense in the NFL, now there are the excuses, right? He came over with Baker. Baker looked a lot better, but ultimately kind of regressed. They went to Jacoby Brissett, then they traded for Watson, and Watson has been bad for almost a year now, but he's showing signs of getting better and back to good Deshaun Watson. We'll see if that continues or not. But, the reason why I'm saying this seat is a little bit hot is this offense has been bad, but you have some excuses that you can make for him as well. Losing Nick Chubb, Watson being bad.
It's big,
and,
yeah.
That's not his choice. He didn't choose to sign Deshaun or trade for Deshaun Watson and give him a fully guaranteed contract, right? That was on the GM more than Stefanski. Stefanski could say, I want this guy, but he's not the one signing the contract. So I just want to put that out. I think that he should be a little bit nervous, but I'm not saying that he should be outright scared just yet.
Yeah,
so
agreed.
All right, so these are the honorable mentions. We just wanted to talk about those guys quickly. The guys we're going to talk about next, we're going to talk about from a fantasy perspective as well, get a little bit more in depth with the players. So the number 5 guy for both of us is going to be Frank Reich with the Carolina Panthers. And I like Frank Reich. I think he's a good guy. But the problem with Frank Reich is I just don't think he's that good. You look at his record when he was with Indy, they ultimately went 40-33 with a tie in there, 55% win rate with a pretty good roster. And I get it. Again, you have the same excuses for that team as you do for Kevin Stefanski. They lost Andrew Luck. They lost, Phillip Rivers. They were constantly going through these quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
Frank Reich never had the ability to get synergy. And then ultimately he gets fired in the middle of last year. Doesn't work out. Comes over to Carolina. Had some sort of say in the decision to take Bryce Young, and Bryce Young's playing right now. I'm not seeing his stats, but when you look at Bryce Young and you see the deficiencies that he has, he could ultimately be a good player. But when you see Stroud at the same time with similar offense, like teams around both players, and Stroud is outperforming expectations and Bryce Young is massively underperforming expectations. And you can say all you want, oh, they need a wide receiver 1. Thielen is a guy that has a lot of experience. Who is the Houston Texans' experienced wide receiver 1? They've got some youth. They've got Nico. They've got Tank.
Collins,
but, that is on Frank Reich. And again, like I mentioned before, Frank Reich is an offensive coordinator, and this offense does not look good. And I get it. You can make all the excuses. They don't have the players they want. He's fresh in the system. But, man, it needs to be a little bit better than this. So the one thing I will say for him right now, he is 16th in the league in terms of yardage. So they are moving the ball pretty well on this team. But like I said, you just need to see.
Well, and the problem with that, though, that I feel that a lot of that yardage is in, garbage time,
Yeah.
which for fantasy is great, having all these garbage time plays and yardages, but it's not really, I mean, it's adding up, but it's not, I mean, it's adding up for Adam Thielen. It's adding up a little bit for Bryce Young, but really
Hmm.
not that much. I mean, other than that, there's really not a lot of fantasy relevant players, on this team. Like we thought that like Miles Sanders was going to be the guy. Now it's Chuba Hubbard. Might be the guy if he's not injured as well. Like the offensive line is pretty bad.
Yeah.
And Bryce Young has played pretty bad. Overall. Like I don't really see a lot of development quite yet out
Right.
of Bryce Young that we would hope to see. I understand he's a rookie and he's getting used to the NFL, and it's
Hmm.
a lot different speed than what he was in college. But compared to some of these rookies
Well,
and their own and their owner, especially with David Tepper
yeah, he's
really
very
wanting to
impatient.
build it's build a winning team, like that puts a lot of pressure on a head coach.
Yep.
And I think for all those reasons, that's why we thought Frank Reich could be really really seen in the unemployment line here soon.
Yeah, and I'm not advocating for it. I would say give Frank Reich maybe another year or two,
Yeah.
but again, it is promising that they're able to move the ball, and he's a
Yeah.
top half with a pretty, in terms of talent on this team, he's probably bottom 10, so he's outperforming expectations in terms of what the offense is able to do. But again, a lot of it, like you said, is in garbage time, so you don't love to see that. You want to see it throughout the entire game. So Frank Reich, he's kind of a half honorable mention, half probably because of David Tepper, the owner, and the impatience that is there. But if they move on from Frank Reich really quickly, what do we think that does to the players for this team? I actually think it has a negative impact on Bryce Young. I think Frank Reich is probably one of the best guys you can have for Bryce Young in the NFL right now, in terms of making it easier for him. So if they were to move on, I'm a little nervous.
I see that, but like I also don't really see a lot of what Frank Reich really did to elevate a lot of his quarterbacks. Like in Indy,
Mhm.
he had a lot of experience in Phillip Rivers, Matt Ryan, and that really helps. So like, how much did he help coaching up those guys? I get in Philly that he probably coached up Nick Foles, Carson Wentz,
Right.
and we've seen that, but also Philadelphia had more of a team at that point compared to where Carolina is, where there's a lot of holes on that team.
Mhm. I think the most disappointing thing so far for Carolina this year is how much the defense has regressed. This defense has been
Big
top 10 the
time,
last couple of
big
years.
time.
They haven't
Yes.
really lost any players and any massive names over the last couple of years. So the fact that the defense has taken that big of a step back, again, I get it. Frank Reich's more of an offensive mind, but that's very, very concerning. And again, as a head coach, you're in charge of making sure your defense is good. You're in charge of choosing a good defensive coordinator and everything like that. So again, give him one more year, see what he can do. But, I think he's probably very close to being one and done with this team.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump to the next guy here. And this guy is everybody's favorite villain right now, and that is going to be Arthur Smith with the Atlanta Falcons. And the reason why I think we're both advocating for this is kind of the line. Frank Reich, I don't really think he should be fired yet.
Yeah.
Arthur Smith and the next three guys we're going to talk about, I think all three of these guys should be fired today. They should not even finish out the season, but
Agreed.
They're probably not going to. I don't think any of these guys are going to get fired in the season. So Arthur Smith has a terrible record. It's kind of funny, there's all of these excuses, and I was kind of complicit in it in 2022, right? But in 2021, he comes in 7-10 with Matt Ryan before Matt Ryan fell off the age cliff, and the team was still decent. 2022, 7-10 yet again. 2023, 4-5, on pace to be 7-10. It looks like that's kind of just this guy's MO. But having an 18-25 record so far through 3 years, 2.5 years, that's not great. Couple that with this offense is horrific in terms of all rankings across the NFL. They are in 2021, 29th in the NFL in yardage that they had, 26th in points. In 2022, they were 24th in yardage, 15th in points. That's great. You're seeing a little bit of improvement there. This year, they're 11th in yardage. Great. Awesome step up. 25th in points. They are not capitalizing, and these offenses are terrible. You couple that with the fact that Arthur Smith absolutely refuses. And I'm a fantasy guy, Arthur, so you can take your hate out on me. I don't care.
Yes.
But you absolutely refuse to use Bijan Robinson in the red zone. He has one red zone touch in his entire. You took the guy 8 overall. You took Kyle Pitts, the highest tight end ever drafted. Ever drafted. We'll see if Brock Bowers can break that mold next year. My money is on no, probably not. Kyle Pitts is the highest drafted tight end ever. He still has the talent. We've seen the flashes, the behind the back catch that he made a couple of weeks ago. The dude is a good player, and you decide to feature Jonnu Smith over him. Jonnu gets more targets and more first reads than Kyle Pitts. Drake London, that's kind of worked itself out a little bit. He likes to focus Drake London a little bit more as the first read. But, dude, it's just awful. It's awful. This offense is bad. It's terrible. And you're an offensive coordinator. What do you do here? You have one of the worst offenses in the league. Get out. And from a fantasy perspective, I think if you move on from Arthur Smith, literally all of these guys just get better. I don't care about, Desmond Ridder. I don't care about Taylor Heineke. Whoever's the quarterback, I do not care. But you're going to be seeing a lot more usage of Bijan. You'll see a lot more usage of Kyle Pitts. You'll see a lot more usage of Drake London. And these guys will actually be the fantasy relevant players that we all want them to be. We need to see Arthur Smith gone. And I don't think it's going to happen. Maybe if they lose to the Saints in this division, because this division is very, very weak.
It's wide open.
Yeah, and if they don't win this division, I could see Arthur Blank saying, all right, that's enough, But at the same time, I could also see Arthur Blank making excuses for him, like, oh, we got to get him a quarterback. You've had 3 top 8 picks the last 3 years. What are you doing? You cannot say, we haven't gotten a quarterback.
And then they've chosen to go with, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and then and then this year with Bijan. And I think one of the bigger problems I have with Arthur Smith is that he constantly feels like he has to be the smartest guy in the room and try to outsmart everybody. I think what really gets me too is that he comes from money, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. By any means.
I don't really care.
But I don't think he's had to work that hard to get, or as hard to get where he's at now because of his connections and ties. And that's part of it, just thinking you're better than everybody and you're smarter than everybody and you're trying to outsmart the system and trying to give Jonnu Smith touches inside the 5 when you have a all-world running back behind there. Even Tyler Algier would have been a better option than Jonnu Smith running down there. And it's ridiculous. It's clunky. It doesn't work. And they're 4-5 this year when they should be far and beyond, or far and above better than,
dude.
It's the Saints.
Oh my gosh.
It's the Bucks, and it's just ridiculous.
What's hilarious? So, we call him a Nepo baby, right? As a joke between two of us. So his first year of coaching, he was a graduate assistant for North Carolina in 2006 when he was 24 years old. 2007, he goes to work as a defensive quality assistant for the Washington Redskins. You know what field that is? FedEx Stadium.
FedEx Field.
FedEx Field. His dad owns FedEx. Oh my gosh, that started his entire coaching career. That is hilarious. Yes. I did not know that until just now.
And it's all about connections.
Oh, dude.
And that's he constantly,
hilarious.
It's wild.
Oh
and I think that's just a frustrating thing that we have about him is that he's not getting these, high.
Yeah.
No. In these high drafted weapons that he has, he's not utilizing them how a typical OC would. I mean, he was in Tennessee, as the OC,
He
under
was, yeah, he started as the
under Vrabel.
Yeah, he started as the
You
tight
know,
ends coach and moved his way up, but he was actually
yeah, yeah,
decent in that. But again, you had Derrick Henry, and you decided to feature him in
yeah.
the red zone. That's for sure. But
Exactly. Yeah. It's because he's King Henry.
right,
And like we all thought he was going to do that with Bijan, but now he's I don't know. I don't know what it is with him, and I really want to just fire him into the sun and
right,
just be gone with him.
yep.
But I know they're going to be in the playoff hunt the whole year,
Hmm.
and on the other side, like their defense has been playing pretty well, overall. So
Right.
like they've been in
They
games,
spent a lot
but
of money on the defensive side, but
yes, they
yeah,
did.
I again, if you're an offensive mind and you have a terrible offense and you actually outright refuse to use your good players,
Refuse to
then
use your
get
weapons.
them out.
Yes,
Just get them out. Fire
yes,
them into the
fire
sun.
him into sun. Yes, please do.
All right, number 3 here for us is going to be Brandon Staley with the Los Angeles Chargers, and this one might be a little bit more surprising because Brandon Staley, through his NFL tenure, has a 23-19 record. 55%. It's not like he's a bad coach, but the problem is Brandon Staley. Again, one, he's a defensive coordinator and has some of the worst defenses in the NFL. Like, it's terrible. They're bottom 10 in terms of points allowed. They're bottom 10 in defensive ranks just across the board. They're terrible against the rush, except this year. They're much, much better against the rush this year. But conversely, they're 30th against the pass. So, it's kind of funny that the 1 year they tried to sell out to stop the run, now they're terrible against the pass. But again, you're a defensive-minded head coach, and you have a terrible, terrible defense. Well, you couple that with the fact that he makes the worst decisions, and I don't know if this is him. It feels like it's more him than ownership, and I think that
I
the
agree.
Chargers are probably going to get sold here in the next couple of years. There's all the family struggles and blah, blah, blah behind the scenes. But this guy, he comes from an analytics mindset, and people hated it in his first year when he was so aggressive,
Yes.
aggressive, and
He
I
was
loved it.
very aggressive.
I
Yes,
loved it, but he has taken
I was the
his
same.
foot.
I was the same.
He took his foot off the pedal completely, and now he's become just a vanilla coach. And you're in the same division as the Kansas City Chiefs,
Kansas City
and
Chiefs.
every single year, on paper, people say, "Man, you guys could go toe to toe with the Chiefs. You are that talented. You are that loaded on the entire team, right?" And they continue to it's called chargering for a reason. They just continue to just blow
Yes.
their chances. And, looking at this year, they're already 4-4. They can still make playoffs. I'm not saying that they can't, but it's going to be a long shot, especially against that division where the Chiefs are playing out of their minds and the AFC is just absolutely loaded. The NFC or the AFC North might take all 3 of the wild card spots this year. So I just think that it's going to be a losing season again for the Chargers. And again, going into 2023, this roster was loaded. Now, let me ask you, what if they move on from Brandon Staley, what do you think that does to the players on this team from a fantasy perspective?
I mean, I don't think he had a lot to do with the offense. I think defensively he had more to do with it. I think I I don't I think a lot of the problem is their offensive coordinators that they've had.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you and I have talked a lot about Kellen Moore and
Yeah.
his very basic schemes and his lack of play calling and scheming
Yeah,
together
it's more
plays.
lack of creativity. Like his
Yeah,
ability to
and
chain
creativity.
things together is terrible. It's just
Yeah.
bad. But
Yeah,
he's creative at the same time.
yeah, so I think fantasy wise, I don't think it's going to be that bad.
Mhm.
I think the biggest thing is like where is there, but like once Keenan Allen retires and well
Mhm.
he's getting up there in age. I think he's what
Right. He's
31, 32.
30, he'll be 31.
Yeah, so he's almost 31. So, he probably has a couple years left with Justin Herbert.
Right.
And then you have Austin Eckler who's I don't know
probably a
what they're
free
going to do
agent
with
next
it.
year.
Yeah, he's probably going to be a free agent.
I
You
think they'll
know,
bring him back. I really do, but I
yeah,
wouldn't
but
be
that
shocked if
yeah,
they
yeah,
don't.
and then Mike Williams is chronically injured every year, at least a couple times.
Right.
And he's going to be coming back from a major injury. And then we have, I just think there's too many charging things that are in this team's way to really be super fantasy relevant,
Hmm.
because a lot of the problem is the defense giving up so much, which does help your offense because your offense has to keep up. But
Kind of,
like
but
we aren't
if you have a better defense, that
it
means that your
does it,
your offense has the ball more. You know what I mean? Like they're not able to
yes,
just
I agree.
drag it out. Because I hear what you're saying, and this argument is always so silly to me because like if you have a really bad defense, that means that they can just do super long,
Whatever they
drawn
want.
out,
Yeah.
15 play
Yeah.
drives that take 10 minutes off the clock, and all of a sudden, well, they got 7 points at the end of it too. So it's like having a better defense means that you can do that instead, which I would
Yes.
rather have
Yes.
my team being the ones that
Oh
takes the
yeah,
10
yeah,
minute
yeah.
drive,
I fully agree. I fully agree with that. So
Right.
it's for fantasy options. I don't think his absence doesn't really do a whole lot. I mean,
Sure.
hopefully they can get better defensive. A lot of it isn't the pass rush that they have with Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. Like,
Right.
it goes to the GM. I think it's what Tom Telesco's is
Yes.
their
Tom Telesco.
GM still
Yep.
forever, which they can fire him into the sun as well
I
because
don't think
he
he's done a good
I
job in my opinion,
he
but
I think when he
every
signed
year
JC Jackson to that huge contract,
I get it.
that
I
really
get it.
set them back.
I get it, but at the
He's
same time, we
in drafting as well, and
at the
he
same
hasn't
time, though,
drafted as well.
we just talked about every year the Chargers on paper. You're like, dang, this team could
I
go
know
off
that.
with anybody.
I know
So I
that.
think
I
he's
know
doing
that.
his job. I think it's more of a coaching side that's not
Yeah,
living up to the potential. But we're splitting hairs there. But
yeah, we are
no, I'm with you there. I think Brandon Staley, moving on from him, honestly, what they'd probably do is elevate Kellen Moore to head coach at
probably
that point.
probably yeah.
Where again, I think it's just a continuation. I don't think there's much of a difference there. So the good news is Brandon Staley, I think they would actually probably open up things a little bit more. I'd be more excited for guys like Quentin Johnston. You saw early in the year that they just refused to play, and I put this out on Twitter. Quentin Johnston has done everything that you could want from him on the field, right? He's constantly getting open. He's running the right routes, picking up the blocks he's supposed to be doing. He's just not getting targets. He's not the first read. And he's also not getting on the field as much as you'd want for a first round pick, right? And the reason why is Brandon Staley knows he's playing for his job this year. He knows that. It's been talked about for 2 years that this guy, maybe get rid of him, So he knows he's playing for his job. And because of that, he's playing scared. Again, go back to year one of Brandon Staley, where he was one of the most aggressive guys in the league. Get that first round pick out there. Who cares? You've seen what they've kind of started to unlock him a little bit. You get him the ball in space, and man, the dude can just dominate, right? But instead, they're playing scared. And again, that's another reason why I don't like Brandon Staley is he's not making good personnel decisions at the same time. Why is Gerald Everett on the field at all? Donald Parham is the better tight end of these guys. And it's constantly this where he's making decisions where it's playing scared. And I don't think that he isn't playing seriously. Like he wants to keep his job essentially. So, I just think that moving on from Brandon Staley would have an ultimate impact on this offense in a positive direction. Again, you increase the defense, the team's gonna have the ball more, which I'm all for, right? So, Brandon Staley probably time to get rid of him.
Yeah. And I don't think he's necessarily going to get fired during the year because
No,
I can see them just
they'll be
letting him go
competitive
in
the
the off
entire year,
season.
right?
Yeah,
For
yeah.
the wild card.
Personally, me, if I was the Chargers, I would have let him go after that horrific wild card loss against the Jags. Like that was just
28 nothing.
it was just a lapse of coaching. Like you're
Yep.
not coaching up your guys. You're getting complacent, and that's kind of where Brandon Staley is. He's just complacent, and he's gonna get let go.
All right, number 2 on the list here, and I don't think this is going to be a surprise to anybody.
Oh.
Matt Eberflus with the Chicago Bears.
Oh,
This guy, again, I'm going to reiterate this with all of these guys. You're a defensive coach, and you have the worst, literally the 32nd ranked defense in the NFL. What
bad.
do you do here? What do you do here? And I get it. Yeah, they've shed some players, but you traded, him and the GM seem like they're on two completely different pages. You couple that with, as the head coach, you're responsible for choosing your offensive coordinator. Luke Getsy has been bad. You have chosen not to get rid of Luke Getsy. Why is he still on this team? Why does he still have a job as the offensive coordinator? Oh, well, they started to get a little bit better last year, and they started to get a little bit better this year.
They're bad and
but
have
they
always
still
been
lose
bad.
every single
Yes.
game. And, well, we got to keep him around. We got to see what he can do. What he's doing is he's losing you games. Like, Luke Getsy is not a great offensive mind. I like the guy. He seems like a nice guy, but he's not an offensive coordinator. He took the offensive coordinator job for the first time. He was like a quarterback's coach, I believe, or a wide receivers coach for Green Bay, and took the offensive coordinator job last year. This is his only 2 years of experience, and I will say it's not been a positive one in my opinion. So the fact that you're 5-21, you were 3-14 last year. I mean, look at what was Hugh Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
He
Oh
had
yeah. He was like 1-31.
Yeah, and he got fired
He was
for
bad.
about the same, you know what I mean? So
Yep.
this guy should not even be coaching the game that's playing right now that I'm going to be catching up on here after this, but
I mean, and with that, I think if they lose, that somebody
oh,
should get fired.
oh, for
Somebody
sure.
should get fired.
They're
So,
going to
I
lose.
don't care if
Panthers are
it.
going to win this one.
Yeah, yeah. Like I don't care if it's Getsy. I don't care if it's. I don't care if they fire Ryan Poles. Which they won't fire the
They
GM
won't.
right
They
now.
won't.
But
They won't.
but I mean, I think part of the problem was that they hired the head coach before they got the GM,
Yes.
and
Yep.
that's really what started all this mess. And there's different
And you
philosophies on what they want to do, and
and you picked a defensive minded head coach. Like
which
it doesn't
I'm
work
fine
with
with.
it doesn't
I'm
work with Fields. It doesn't work with
Yeah,
Fields.
correct,
And you're going to
correct.
now, and the reason we know he's going to get fired, like Chicago's going to have probably the number 1 and number 2, or number 1 and number 3, or 2 and 3, whatever.
Or whatever.
Doesn't matter. They're going to have 2 top 5 picks, right?
Yeah.
They're getting a quarterback. Whether it's Caleb Williams, Drake May, it doesn't really matter. They're getting one. You are not rolling with Matt Eberflus with the next guy. And the good news is, I think if they do go after this year, they're going to fire Matt Eberflus. They're going to bring in a guy, and that guy's going to make the decision on, I would rather have Justin Fields, or I'd rather have Caleb Williams or Drake May. Let's assume for the sake of this argument that somebody else has the 101. So that leaves you Drake May as the possibility at 2, right? The new head coach is going to come in, and they're going to have to decide, Justin Fields, we've seen flashes from him, but nothing consistent yet. Are we going to go with him, or are we going to go with Drake May? They might decide to go with a guy that can fix Justin Fields, which would be awesome for fantasy football. And then you just add Marvin Harrison Jr., or an offensive lineman, and all of a sudden you bring in an offensive mind, and I'm not entirely sure who that would be. That maybe it's Ben Johnson. If I was the Bears, I would do everything in my power to bring Ben Johnson in over from the Lions. He would make such a positive impact for this offense. It would be nuts. He's all of a sudden fixing this offense, and whether it's Drake May or Justin Fields, I don't really care who the quarterback is for the team. I'd love if it was just Justin Fields. Like, I like Justin Fields, so I'd love him to stay here. But either way, all of a sudden, Cole Kmet's going to be more consistent. I think that Roshan Johnson or Khalil Herbert is going to be more consistent. They're going to bring in a wide receiver with whoever it is, but DJ Moore and wide receiver X, T. Higgins, whoever it's going to be this offseason, is going to be very consistent. And all of a sudden, these players that have some fantasy relevance are going to be so much better for fantasy. So moving on from Matt Eberflus, not only does it help us because I'm just tired of watching this team be terrible, but it's going to open this offense up because there's no chance they're going to go defensive-minded head coach again. There's no chance.
And if they do, I feel I've lost all faith in whatever the Bears can do. Like they've just been mediocre for a decade plus, and it's hard to watch because with them being such a historic franchise, and being so close geographically to us, like we have to watch their games every week,
Yeah,
and
right.
it's like I would rather bleach my eyes at this point than
Right.
than to watch the Bears. I love Justin Fields, I love DJ Moore, I love Cole Kmet. I love all these offensive weapons that they, and even Darnell Mooney. Like I like these guys, and I think they could be fantasy relevant, but you have Luke Getsy, who should should shouldn't even coach a high school team at this point. He's so bad.
He
You
could coach
know, you
college.
know,
He could definitely coach.
yeah, like
College
D3,
is,
but that's
dude,
beside the
college is
point.
like 5 plays. He's got 5 plays.
It maybe he might have 3 plays. Like it was just so bad last year. Like I just don't know what their plan is. Like offensive,
Hmm.
defensively. I mean, they are better offensively this year. They are a little bit better. I mean, statistically, they have to be better defensively because they were last year.
Yeah.
you know they are improving, but they're not improving enough. Like there's in and with the press conference that Matt Eberflus had yesterday,
Yeah.
which
The tank
which
is
would have
in.
been,
The tank is
yeah, it
in.
was just it was about Justin Fields' availability and how he's like 51% in, 51% out. Like literally the numbers don't add up with this guy. Literally. And he's just talking a lot of coach speak. It doesn't make sense. There's no and I just think he's lost the locker room, and he's lost these
Hmm.
guys, and these guys are just playing for next year to hopefully have a job themselves.
Yeah, and that's again Matt Eberflus. He's just not. He does not seem to. He was a good
No.
defensive coordinator for Indy before he came over. Maybe that's where he's going to go back and do that again, and he'll be just fine. But he just seems to be over his head, and I wish him the best of luck wherever he's going next. But 100% chance he's going to get fired at the end of the season. But
I think I would not be shocked if he's fired.
if they lose
Like
tonight, I could see it.
if they lose tonight, I wouldn't be shocked if he's fired Monday.
Yeah, so we will see. We will see. But we've already seen Josh McDaniel get fired in Can, so hopefully
Yeah.
that'll kind of set some of these other guys up. And I think Ryan Poles too would be one of those guys who's like, I'm not gonna wait around for you to, you know, to
I
to
mean, I mean, I mean, he honestly shouldn't, because his seat's pretty hot too.
right. And it gives you the best.
So
Like they
yeah,
talked about it with the Raiders, right? It gives you the best chance to look at these other candidates that are out there, and
and they kind of have first pick of kind of who you want.
don't interview them, but call them on the phone and
Yeah.
talk about if
Yes.
they're interested in the job. None
Yeah.
of those
Yeah.
conversations that never happen. But
Right.
so I could see it, but we'll see how tonight's game plays out. You guys probably already know the results by this point, but you can hit us up in the comments down below. And then number one candidate that we both want to see get fired, and I think that it's going to have an impact positively on the value of the offensive players on this team, is going to be Ron Rivera with the Washington Commanders.
Riverboat Ron.
And Ron Rivera, I feel so bad putting him here at number one
I do
because
too. I do too.
I like Ron Rivera. I think he's a good guy, like genuinely a good human. He went through the cancer a couple years ago. He's finally free and everything. But again, you have a bad defense. You're a defensive minded guy. You were a head coach for Carolina with Cam Newton for all those years, and you had a winning record down in Carolina. Ultimately they had a 55% winning record with Carolina, but sadly with Washington through 4 years, he's only got a 45% win rate. They've only been above 500 one time of those 4 years. I don't think this year they're going to be above 500, especially after moving on from Chase Young and also Montez Sweat. So
Sweat. Yeah.
their defense was supposed to be, you look at the defense, they've spent so many first round picks on this defense the last 5-6 years, and
Yeah.
none of them, like you
Yeah,
have a
it's
bottom 10 defense, and that's just not a good sign.
yeah, it's just not working out. It's with talent, with
Hmm.
injuries. Like it just hasn't. And I feel that Ron Rivera's put in a bad spot because of
Hmm.
what his GM did.
Yeah.
In taking out some of those playmakers, because like Sweat was playing really well.
Oh yeah.
Chase Young was starting to heat up and do and
Right.
play really well and be available. But I honestly think that the best thing that's happened with these trades that we saw, it was last week, is that this Commanders offense is going to throw for a lot of yards because they're
Hmm.
going to be playing catch up and all these garbage time plays. As long as they can throw to Scary Terry and Jahan Dotson, hopefully every now and again.
Hmm.
I mean, along with Brian Robinson, I think he's a little bit less fantasy relevant because of that, and I'm not really sure where he fits. Same with
Right.
Antonio Gibson. He's always in the he's always in the doghouse somewhere. So
Yep. And the thing with Ron Rivera, like, again, his defenses have been bad, and that's fine, but it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that he's going to get fired as well. Same with Eberflus. Supposedly, all the reports are that at the trade deadline, he did not want to get rid of either one of those guys, and
yeah,
ownership said, "Yep, see you later. We'll take whatever
that's
we
too
can get
dang
from these two
bad. Yep,
guys."
yep.
And I will say Ron kind of kept his job for a little bit longer because of the whole Dan Schneider transition. There was all the reports and this guy needs to sell a team, blah, blah, blah. But they kept him along as the head coach just for the continuity this first year. I think this ownership group, you got Magic Johnson and all the other guys that are taking over here. I think that they're going to want to really start to push forward with their own influence this next year, and they're going to be moving on from Ron Rivera. I think they're going to give him the courtesy of finishing out the year just because of
I
who
agree.
he is and his tenure and everything.
Well, and all of what they did to his defense too, like they've
Yeah, they
kind of gave
gutted
him
it. They gutted it.
yeah, and they honestly did and they don't have as good of cornerback safeties. I know the past few years they've tried to get talent, but that talent really hasn't done very well. So
Mhm.
I feel bad for him because like they do have a very good and tenured coaching staff, with Ron Rivera, at OC they have Eric Bieniemy, which we've seen Eric Bieniemy kind of
They've changed this
step.
offense a lot on the
Yes,
like the
they
passing
have.
side.
Yes, they have.
They're top
I've been
10. They're top
yes,
10
I
in all records across the board
uh-huh.
for
Yeah, and
the offense passing.
and I've been very impressed with Bieniemy's offense.
Mm.
And then on the defensive side, like they have Jack Del Rio, who is a very tenured coach and a very well respected coach.
Yep.
So I wouldn't be shocked if they let those two guys go and they keep Bieniemy because he's kind of the new hotness right now.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of go on from there, and hopefully they can have some success with under Bieniemy. But it's really all up to the Sam Howell and his development.
Yeah, and Bieniemy has come out and said that he really likes Sam Howell. So I think if they move on from Ron, they are going to be the team that makes Eric Bieniemy an NFL head coach.
Yep.
So the good news is I think that the offense, you're going to see a little bit more continuity. The better news is I think you're going to see a little bit less of the doghousing that you've kind of seen from these guys. Ron Rivera, he's kind of the old school, you fumble, you're done forever. We're going to lock you down. Whereas you look at Andy Reid and the Chiefs, and they did not do that. You're kind of, they'll pull you, they'll sit you down, let you make sure you're mentally there and mentally right, but they're not going to just absolutely destroy your career there. So I think that better days are ahead, and I think this offense is going to keep rolling. And moving on from Ron Rivera, I don't think it's going to have a negative impact on any of these guys. I think Sam Howell actually has been playing well. They need to get an offensive line in front of him so he's not getting sacked a million times.
That's been the biggest. Like it's embarrassing to watch their offensive line, which they haven't been able to keep. Like I think a couple years ago they lost Brandon Sheriff, who was a long time guard there. They
lost him to Jacksonville. Paid a ton for him.
Which I don't blame him for getting out of Washington with all that.
I mean, they lost Trent Williams because he just absolutely hated the coach or the medical staff and refused to play for the team.
Staff. It was all bad. Yeah.
So better days are ahead for this offense, and I think that moving on from Ron is only going to open things up a little bit more for this offense going forward. So, and I think that they're also not going to focus so heavily on the defensive side in the draft as well, right? They're going to try and actually focus on some of these offensive players. And I get it; they took Jahan Dotson last year in the first round, but they could have had Sam Laporta this year. They could have had Michael Mayer. They could have had any of these guys. Instead, they took a below average size cornerback, and the guy's been getting lit up every single week because they decided that they were going to take him and put him on the outside, not in the slot where he played all of college. So it's decisions like that are just not great, especially by Ron Rivera here. So all right, that is our top 5 coaches. And one thing I did want to talk about really quickly at the end here, Bill Belichick. We actually didn't talk about him. I don't think that Bill Belichick should get fired. And as a Patriots fan, I'm just going to say this. I do think that he should be fired from GMing, but I do think that he's a great coach in terms of what he's able to do with what he's got. But his ability to find talent, dude, is just horrible.
I mean, personally, me as a Miami Dolphin fan, I want him to stay forever now because he is setting the Dolphins up for a couple easy wins a year.
Yeah.
And I am here for it after 2 decades of
just destruction, domination.
Yeah. I don't want to talk about the last.
All right. So let us know your thoughts if there's anybody that you would like to see on the head coaching chopping block here, or even offensive coordinators that you are just absolutely out on completely. We talked about Luke Getsy a little bit there, but if there's anybody else you want to talk about, hit us up in the comments down below. Thank you guys again for listening and joining us here today. We're going to get back to some more of the Dynasty specific content next week where we're talking about this, but man, I feel so much better after trashing these guys.
I do too.
Yeah, it feels great. Just get to hate on these guys. So you love to see it sometimes, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Again, find us on Twitter at TDC_Calvin, at Dynasty_Dale, and the podcast at FF After Dark. Follow us, subscribe to the channel so you can get all of our content. And again, after the season, we're going to be hitting you guys up with all kinds of rookie content, rankings, all that stuff. So thank you guys again for joining us. And until next time, have a good night.
And we all got dreams, we all want things. But what you gonna do for it? How you gonna move for it? What you gonna be?